This is the Healthy Business Podcast, the show for ambitious business owners who want to grow and scale in a healthy way. I'm Sarah Cook, and I'll be sharing with you tips, inspiration, and proven methods from leading business experts, entrepreneurs, and health and wellness professionals to help you grow your business with more income and having more impact, but in a way that works for you. Because when you have clarity and strategy, you can achieve the results you want. Welcome back to the Healthy Business Podcast. Today, I am joined by the wonderful Arianna Trapani, and we are going to be talking about imposter syndrome and mindset and how that shows up for us in self-confidence, but also the results that we can create within our business. And I know this is such a big topic, and I'm excited to see where our conversation goes. Arianna is amazing expert in this area. So I'm delighted to welcome you to the show.
Oh, hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's having worked with you before. I think it's just amazing what you do and how you help people. And yeah, the game-changing sort of results that you can create by just shifting a little few things really within your mindset, and actually that becomes a daily practice rather than an overnight thing, and we have to continue to work on it. So yeah, as I said, I'm super excited to see where we go with this conversation. Before we go into that though, one question that I always ask my guests on this show is what a healthy business means to you. So I'd love your take on this one.
Wow. So a healthy business for me is definitely about balance. Balance and doing something with passion, something that you really thrive on. It brings you the energy, because they do say that success is, 80% mindset, 20% strategy. And I believe when you're doing something out of passion, when you have that balance in your life, that's where the energy is at a good place and you produce your best. And that's when I think you're in the flow, and that's where everything works out. So self-care is definitely important, and we need to look after ourselves, because, when we're not 100% there, when we're not feeling great, we don't produce our best. And so that's what being, in a healthy business, that's what it looks like for me.
Amazing. I love that. It's so aligned to my thinking as well. I think it is. We both see this too, that people push so hard for business results, but actually, as you said, like if you can have a great strategy, but if you don't believe that, if you aren't energetically connected to that, if you're not looking after yourself to be able to deliver that strategy, then actually it's not going to land. You're not going to get the results that you want to. And I think sometimes that is the missing piece for a lot of people, that you can be super clear on who it is that you want to work with, and you have a great action plan in place, but yeah, if you're not showing up for yourself or for your business, then those results are not going to come through. One thing you mentioned there was kind of being in flow. And I love talking about this because it's something that I think can get a bit misunderstood, or to a certain extent, people think, well, that's really trivial. How does that actually help us when we're just, busy doing things? So I'd love to explore what actually flow means to you as well.
Well, there's this quote and this saying that I absolutely love, that says, what you think you become, what you feel you attract, and what you imagine you create. And I do honestly believe that it all comes down to our mindset. And when I say working in flow, I mean, are you really aligned to your values? Are you doing something that is truly aligned to your values? Because most of the time, in fact, a lot of the time, we're doing something, every day that isn't necessarily aligned to our values, but we think they are. And so sometimes I think it's important to sit down and to really, this is the work sometimes, that I mainly do with my clients, is figuring out, what are your values? What is really true to you right now? Because maybe what was true to you, let's say, even a year ago, your values back then have completely changed. And so if you're working from a place where you're not aligned to your values, subconsciously, you don't realize it, you're not going to produce your best work, because you are kind of out of sorts. You're kind of out of alignment. And I believe a lot in energy. And I feel like when the energy isn't there, everything you do, it doesn't produce as well as it could. And I know this can sound a bit fluff for a lot of people, but I know from experience how that really, really works. And it does come down to our mindset as well. Mindset is everything. Like we said, 80% is mindset. And I truly believe that, because when you have that self-belief, when you build that self-confidence, I do see that amazing things can happen. And I'm a big believer of that, in believing in ourselves. And I do believe that everything we think, we really attract. But we have to, obviously, the reason I believe it is because what we think we become is because we take action. When the confidence is there, we take action. I don't believe in this whole manifesting that, you know, people talk about. I'm a big believer of that, but I don't believe that things just happen without taking action. You know, oh, positive thoughts and it's all going to work out. No, it's positive thoughts that will help you take those small steps and taking the action. And if you are in a place of non-alignment, if you are in a place where the confidence isn't there, you're not going to take those actions and everything will just remain the same. That's what I believe in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it's, you know, and I think our listeners will probably agree as well. Like when you're feeling confident about something, whether that's, you know, what you're wearing or the people that you're with or within your business, the client results that you're getting, you're in a much better place to sell or to go and do more networking or to show up more online because you feel good about things. When something happens and you have a little bit of a wobble, that's when you start taking a step back, and then you end up in this sort of spiral, whether that's positive or negative, and that can be really hard to shift out of that negative spiral if you feel like you're going in that way. One thing you touched on there was the kind of positive thoughts and positive mindset, because this is so much more than just being a positive person, isn't it? You know, we can see people who are positive but actually don't necessarily have a confident mindset. I'd love to kind of explore that a little bit more, because I think, you know, and I talk about positive emotions from a positive psychology perspective, but there is a sort of, I think, not necessarily misunderstanding, but actually someone who's positive can still experience negative emotions. They can still experience those wobbles in confidence, that this isn't just showing up and being happy every day. That's ideally where we want to be, but actually I think it's acknowledging those emotions and then being able to get through them. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit around kind of positivity versus mindset, I guess.
Well, obviously we know in life you're going to get ups and downs. It's never going to be linear, solely upwards. So I think there's this misconception, oh, we need to be positive and be happy all the time. It doesn't work like that. A positive mindset means that through the bad times, you embrace it, you embrace your emotions, you need to cry, you need to let it all out. But it's also that mindset shifting where we can turn it around and learn something from it and move forward. So, I mean, if we look at imposter syndrome or not having a positive mindset or not believing in ourselves, well, it is created solely by our thinking. And if you think that our brains produce about 50,000 thoughts per day, 95% of those thoughts, they're repeated daily, and they reflect our beliefs. And so whatever we do is reflected upon what we believe on. And these actions then turn into the results in our life. But let's say the majority of these thoughts aren't true. They're not based on facts. They're purely based on our thoughts. And it's a shame because they're stopping us from moving forwards. So when we look at mindset, we look at the things that we can't control. So the things that we can't control, for example, let's say the pandemic that happened, or, like with me not long ago, when my father passing away, that's something that we can't control, the outside events. What we can control, though, are our thoughts. And this is the one thing that no one can take away from us, is our thoughts. So when I talk about, positive mindset is about listening, being aware of our thoughts. That's the first step that I think is the most important, is becoming aware of what we are thinking. What are we saying to ourselves? Is it serving us? Is it helping us to move forwards? Majority of the time it isn't. Yeah. So I say always be aware and write it down. Start communicating with yourself. Start listening to yourself and write it down and notice what your thoughts are saying. Because our thoughts will trigger our feelings, which in turn will trigger our actions. So if you're coming into a place where, for example, oh, I don't feel good, I can't do that, then what are your feelings? They're not going to be great. You're going to feel a bit sad, you're not feeling positive, and then your actions, you probably won't take any. And so let's try and be aware, and let's try and shift it around. So it's not about being positive the whole time. It's about noticing, becoming aware of your thought process and working on it. And also looking at, okay, so I'm feeling this, how can I change it around? How can I shift this thought? And that's when I say we talk about positive mindset, is trying to learn from what we're going through and how we can be better and what we can learn from what we're going through.
And if someone is in that space of, they recognize that they are maybe kind of unkind to themselves, or they have that awareness that their thoughts are more in the negative space than the positive, what can they do about that? I know this is the work that you kind of help people with.
Well, when we work on a one-to-one basis with my clients, we dig really into our limiting beliefs, because it all comes down to that. And that's a lot of work that's involved. It's digging that up. It's like, peeling the skin off an onion and getting to the root cause and trying to figure out, what will serve you better. And so again, I do think once you realize your limiting beliefs, once you come down to the root cause of why is it that you don't believe in yourself, why is it that you have these negative thoughts, where does it come from, how is it serving you? And then when we look at that, and this is using tools, NLP, CBT, when we come to the root cause, that's when things start shifting, that's when they start changing. And I do think the most important is becoming aware. Be aware. Start thinking to yourself. Start taking note of how you're talking to yourself. And some people love to journal. And if you're one of those people that loves writing things down, then I would suggest start doing it on a daily basis. When you find yourself in a negative slump, write down what you're feeling. And then try and shift it around. Okay, what thought could serve me better? And I want them to write it down. This really helps. Or do the things that make you feel good is one of the main things that can really shift. I know this is also a big integral part of your work as well. It's about, setting the tone, the day, what are you doing? How are you feeling good about yourself? Are you doing something that excites you? The little things, whether it's going for, I love going for a walk in nature. So I try and incorporate that. Some people say they don't have time because, they have to quickly, the school run, go to work. But are you doing anything that's remotely making you feel good or alive, even on weekends, or even the small things, daily small routines? Honestly, morning routines can be as little as 10 minutes. Like I always say, something that really, really helps me is gratitude. I love this so much because in moments that you're feeling at your lowest, and I've gone through this from experience, I always look at the things that I'm grateful for, and I realize, wow, I'm actually in a good position. And that can just be when you're having a shower. You don't necessarily have to sit down and write it out if you don't have time. You can, every morning when you're having a shower, or even just before going to bed, think of the things you're grateful for. 3 things every day. Start getting into a habit, because I do believe that habits, the more you do them every day, they become such a positive and integral part of your life and your journey, and how then you become more positive with yourself because you're feeling good. It's about feeling good, doing the things that make you come alive. Even your hobbies, have you forgotten about them? Bring them back in.
And as you say, it's the simple things as well, isn't it? Like, I think we are all busy. We've all got lots of things going on, and it's so easy to use that excuse, for want of a better word, that we don't have time. But as you said, there are times where, you're having a shower, or even just as you first wake up in the morning, are you just reaching straight for your phone and going and strolling on social media? That's a perfect time to just have those awareness, going back to being aware of your own thoughts and being aware of your feelings, actually utilizing that time to go into gratitude or think about things, or just explore different moments of joy, rather than going straight into the busyness of the day. Because as you said, if you set yourself up for the best day that you can do, whatever that looks like, even if it is just a few minutes, then you're going to be much better placed for when those little wobbles do come up later on in the day, because your brain is already in that sort of more positive space. And really great tips there. Yeah, I love those. Talking from a sort of a business perspective, because, mindset and imposter syndrome, they show up in all sorts of different ways. And earlier we were talking about, the impact on business results. And, it does stop people from, whether it's showing up on social media, whether it's closing a call on, making sales, or even networking and having that self-confidence. There's so many different things that our mindset can play monkeys on, or even moving to that next level, or charging more, raising prices. There's so many different things that can be impacted purely by our beliefs. We've touched a little bit on kind of imposter syndrome. What are the kind of the key areas that you find with business owners? I know you work with a lot of business owners as well, so that come up for them when you're talking about mindset. Like, how does that show up for people? I really want to kind of get sort of into the practical side of this, of the impact on business results, because I think, it's so easy just to talk about being positive, having a good mindset, but actually the reality is that this has a direct impact on the results that you can create within your business.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is a big one. It affects a lot of us at any time in our lives. If we look at what imposter syndrome is, it's basically when you're feeling like a fraud, you don't feel good enough, you're scared people are going to find out, but it creeps up in so many different ways. So it can creep up in the fear of failing, not being good enough, being judged, and it stops us from moving forward. It can creep up when we compare ourselves to others because we don't feel good enough. And again, that stops us from moving forward. It immediately blocks us. Procrastinating is a big one. You keep putting off something because you don't think you're good enough. And so again, you're not taking action. And then we look at perfectionism, when this is a big one, and this is the most common one. And I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I know where this is coming. I can
relate to you on that one.
So I definitely know where this is coming from. And again, you don't think something is good enough. Whatever you do, you never feel like it's at your best. You could be doing better. And you're in that trap where you don't celebrate your wins because it's not good enough. You could have done better. And you always concentrate on the thing that didn't go as you'd want it to. Again, even everything else went amazingly well, you will just be fixated on the thing that didn't go well. And again, this wanting to be perfect, wanting it to be at the best level, sometimes, well, most of the time, will stop us from moving forward because we're not taking the action. We're not going for it because we don't think we're good enough. So it creeps up in so many different ways. And that's the perfectionism is the biggest one, but also the fear of failing. You just, you're scared of that. But so those are the main ones that I always spot when I'm life coaching, and it creeps up in just so many different ways. And there's way more that I probably can't think of right now, but that's what's stopping it. And it all comes down from stopping us taking action because we don't feel we're good enough. And so we don't produce and we don't move forwards.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I remember having a conversation with a client, and she just didn't want to set goals because she was like, well, if I set goals, then that means I have to strive towards hitting them. And I'm like, that's the point of it, right? Like, they don't have to be, long-term goals, but let's break those down into smaller ones. But I think it comes through as that fear of failure because you can't fail if you haven't got goals. And I think similarly with the kind of perfectionism, I think a lot of this, we haven't really touched on this actually, but a lot of our beliefs come from our childhood. And perfectionism is definitely something that I recognize from childhood. And I think that comes from a little bit from the schooling system that we're in the sense of, we're marked in a certain way. It's about achieving more. It's about the grades that we get. And actually, there's always room for improvement. And I know that that's where my kind of perfectionism came from. And it's hard to shift that from an adult or when you're running your own business, because yes, of course, there's always more that we could do. But I think it's being okay with what we have achieved. And as you say, celebrating the small wins, even let alone the big wins, but even getting to the end of the day and celebrating all the things you have achieved rather than the things that are still on your to-do list. I call it a to-do list, but I think it's just reframing it, isn't it? Of going, actually, as a business owner, there's always going to be so many things that we can be doing. There's already so many hats that we have to wear. But if we constantly stay in this, I'm not achieving as much as I can, then we actually stay in that hustle and scarcity mode rather than celebrating the wins and moving into that growth. Another thing you mentioned there around imposter syndrome and those mindset monkeys was that actually they are going to show up for us whatever level we're at. And if we know that they're going to show up for us, when we do, it goes back to that awareness again. We can then be like, okay, I'm going through another period of growth. I know this is going to happen. This is part of everyday life. This is part of me growing. It becomes a lot easier to navigate through, and it becomes a lot easier to accept what's going on and move through that a lot quicker, I think, as well. Would you agree with that?
Yes, it's really interesting, because if we think about, failure, being scared of failing, it's in NLP, there's no such thing as fail, it's feedback. And I love that, because it's so true. And it's true, because everything that didn't work out, we can learn from it. And it's interesting when you think, it's something that, being scared, the fear, is something that we've acquired growing up. Because look at toddlers, when they're trying to learn to stand up or walk, they keep on falling down, they hurt themselves, they cry, they laugh, but they don't give up, they keep going for it. And we kind of lose that along the way as we grow older. So it's definitely something that we acquire. And it's interesting because it does come down to mindset, because I was reading actually not long ago about Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb. And apparently he was experimenting, for 2 years, trying to convert electricity into light. And apparently a friend is like, oh, how do you do it? How do you keep going after like nearly 100 failures or something like that? And apparently he turned around and said, what do you mean? I don't understand. I haven't failed. I've just found out 100 ways it doesn't work. And I love the way he turned that round.
I love that.
It was like, I didn't fail. I'm learning, I'm evolving.
That's so powerful, isn't it?
I know. I read that. I was like, wow. And I had to I remember writing it down in my notebook, because I'm like, this is something I want to look at, because it's so true. So I love the way he shifted it around, he turned it around. And, it's, no, when you get that no, I always say, think of it as in like, it stands for next opportunity.
Oh, I love that too. Yeah.
Again, it's something that I wrote down, because I remember I've had so many no's in my life and I would be so mortified, but perhaps it was meant to be. It didn't work out because something bigger and better was waiting for me, or, I wasn't at the right time. And then what can I learn from that? How can I move on? Because we're all, like you say, growing up in the academic system is something that I'm a bit funny about when I think about it. I mean, this whole grading system, this whole you have to achieve so and so if you want to go to the best university, it's already, cemented in us from such an early age that if we don't get, that grade that we so desperately want, we can't proceed maybe to the university we want to go to, and immediately our dreams are shattered, and that can have such an impact on us growing up. So I think mindset is definitely something that, for example, in schools should be taught, because I think there's so much more to just going into the real world and continuing our education. Mindset is really, really important.
Yeah, it's a huge part of resilience, isn't it? And I think just touching on inventors there, they did things differently. Like every single thing that has been invented ever is because someone thought about it outside of the box and did things differently. And as you say, probably didn't get there the first time they tried. And I think that's what's really powerful about this work, is that it's okay to lean into that feedback. It's not failing. It's that, I love the kind of next opportunity and the failure versus feedback. It's, I think, just little golden nuggets like that we can hold on to, that if something hasn't quite gone your way. I also, just building on that, read something recently around it's okay to let go of the good to get something great. And I thought that was really powerful as well, because sometimes we can settle and think, okay, well, everything's okay. I'm happy with most things. But if you start getting that sort of misalignment, or you start getting that feeling inside that actually you want more, or you want to do something slightly differently, leaning into that. And even if you know that growth could be a little bit messy because you're testing things, you're trying things out for the first time, that could actually lead to something so much better than what you currently have. And I think, doing things on your own, we were talking before we came online around actually doing things on your own can feel hard. But when you surround yourself with like-minded people, or people that stretch your thinking or think about things in a slightly different way, and I think this is something to really consider, who you're spending your time with, because if you're in an echo chamber of whether it's negativity or very, very similar way of thinking, sometimes that's great. But actually, if it's taking you down a path that you're not comfortable with, or if you're feeling stuck, or if you're feeling sort of static in your business or your growth, explore different conversations, explore different people that you want to chat to, or look at people who are doing things in a slightly different way, because there are so many different ways to not just run your business, but also to get that alignment. And yeah, I think it goes back to the, just because you've always done it doesn't mean you always should be doing it. And that should versus want piece as well is really powerful to just explore, I think, especially if something isn't feeling quite aligned anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's interesting because I'm sure many of us can probably relate. Like sometimes, for example, you might have friends or even your other half who might not understand your vision, or might not understand, let's say, your business, and they might see it more as a hobby, but you have plans, and they might say things that can seem negative, but they just don't get it. Now, if we continue to listen to them and surround us just solely on those kind of people, then we're going to start having that mindset where we're not going to grow, we're not going to believe in ourselves. So it's really important, like you say, to surround yourselves also with the people that make you feel good. There's so many communities online, so many events you could be going. Also, what are you reading? What are you listening to? Everything that we surround ourselves is so, so important, because you will have people that won't get it. Even people that are very close to you. That's normal. Don't judge them for that, because they just don't get it. They don't have the vision that we have. But it's so important to surround yourselves and to look at the things that you're doing to lift that vibration, to lift that energy, to make you feel good. Because when you're feeling good, you're bouncing off ideas. You're in a great place. It's like connecting with people, with business owners that get you, and you just have this community. And there's so much now that you can find online. There's some great communities, great courses. And also, when we're looking at wanting to move forwards, wanting to evolve, you are going to do things that are going to feel uncomfortable, but that's part of growing. And I feel when you have that confidence in yourself, when you want the change, you start listening to your gut a bit more, you start becoming more intuitive. And that's when you know what feels right. So sometimes, we're scared to, take those changes. We're scared maybe on working with a certain coach, or we're scared on taking on a course, or we're scared on doing something that just feels out of the ordinary. But that's where also growth happens. Doing the things that, do slightly scare you, but in a positive way.
Yeah.
And again, that's what confidence comes down to, because there's this misconception, that in order to be confident, we need to have confidence to do things. Actually, that's not how you build confidence. Building confidence is taking those small steps out of your comfort zone. So it's that small steps that will help you to take action. Each action you take, but it's really small. I'm not saying you have to go and do something that's totally out of your character and doesn't feel aligned to you. I'm talking about small steps towards, think of the bigger picture, and then take small steps, towards smaller goals. And it's about courage before confidence. It's having the courage to take those small steps, those small actions. And that's what builds confidence over time. Even the most confident of people will still have areas where they're not necessarily confident. Like maybe I know many women that are super confident in what they do, but they hate public speaking, but they wanted to do it so badly. So they start taking small steps. And, they took the action, but it was a work in progress, but they did it and they built that confidence. So when we talk about confidence, it doesn't mean that you have to be loud and you have to be bold. It's just having that inner resilience and just believing in yourself and taking those small steps. And it happens to all of us. Even, there are certain areas we're not confident in, but it's just doing something. If you really want it, you can. And the good news is that you will build the confidence over time.
So important to remember. And you touched on something there, which I think is really interesting, because there is that sort of misconception that to be confident is about being loud and being, an extrovert and things like that. And I think, I'm definitely not an extrovert. I'm an extroverted introvert, actually, and I get energy from other people, but I totally need my own space and that inner resilience that I've built up over the years. And I think, confidence isn't about being the loudest and the shouting the loudest and being all over social media and sharing all those things. It's about that inner peace, that courage to take those small steps. And I actually almost quite often when I speak to my clients, it's the ones that are just proud, that are courageous, that are inner confidence, that actually are more successful than the ones that are just shouting as loud as possible just to be seen, because I think there's almost a lack of confidence sometimes when that happens. So yeah, it's really interesting that I guess I want to kind of reassure our listeners that you don't have to be, it's not about shouting the loudest. That's not what we mean by confident.
No, and I think it's such an important part, also the comparing ourselves to others. You look at someone and you think, wow, look at her, she's so confident. But again, like you mentioned, someone that's really loud could be putting on an act and they're not actually confident. It's just, it's what we're seeing on social media that isn't necessarily real. Again, it's this thing where we compare ourselves, but what we have to remember is that what we see is just, it's not actually the reality. We're only seeing the good parts. We don't know everyone has a story. We don't know what's going on behind. And being confident is just being really in line with your values, your beliefs, and doing what you truly want to do and being at peace with yourself. That's where confidence comes from. And you don't have to be the loudest. Some people are naturally loud and bold, and that's great. And I embrace that. But there's also, so you don't have to be an extrovert. There's also the introvert. I'm a mix of both. But I'm, growing up, I was definitely an introvert, and I do like my alone time, and I don't like to share everything online. So I have that element, but yeah, you can be really confident. You can be quiet, but you're having the courage to put yourself out there and taking those steps and building what you truly believe in. So I think it's really important when people think, oh, to be confident, maybe I need to be really loud. No, that's definitely a myth.
And I think it's also it's the when people aren't watching, when people aren't looking at what you're doing, that's when you're taking action and you're courageous and you're confident in those smaller steps, almost behind the scenes pieces. That's a real strength of confidence as well, rather than just, as you say, everything that goes out on social media, which is the world we do live in. But it doesn't have to be like that. I think I totally agree with that sort of inner peace, that inner confidence, and just taking those everyday steps that not just from an alignment perspective that help you feel in that space, but also towards your business goals, your business results.
Yeah, it's true though. When you find that inner peace, again, it comes down to our values and being aligned to them and doing what makes you feel good. When we were young, we probably didn't have that inner peace. We were looking for something that we didn't know what we wanted, and we were always striving. And again, when we look at happiness, you see so many people that are really successful maybe in the business, but they lack that happiness because it all comes down to that inner peace that they lack. They're always looking for something more and more and more, and they're not content. And again, that's where gratitude comes in. And perhaps if we slow down and, like you say, celebrate those small wins, which we take for granted, when we slow down and we celebrate those wins, then perhaps we might start learning a little bit more about ourselves and take notice, oh, actually, I'm really good at so-and-so, because we take, again, for granted what we're good at. We don't realize our talents, like you say. So that's really also important, is to slow down and look, you know, what are you proud of? Because you must be proud of something for sure. You just aren't celebrating it.
Absolutely. And we're so busy moving on to the next thing. It's a human trait, isn't it? Especially as a business owner, we're so busy and moving on to that next thing that we forget about all of the other stuff that has created our story, has enabled us to be in the space that we are. It's part of our journey. Oh my goodness, we've touched on so many different things today, which has been amazing. I love it. If someone's listening to this and thinking, oh, I love what she's talking about, how on earth do I get in touch with Arianna? Where can people find you?
Oh, I can definitely find me on my website, ariannatrapani.com, or they can definitely find me on Instagram, you know, private message me there, or on Facebook. I'm always available for a chat. And also, I do offer, you know, half an hour free clarity calls where we just talk. You know, they'll tell me what's stopping them from moving forwards, what's the biggest obstacle, obstacle right now. And then we just chat, and I'll tell them, you know, how I work, and that's all. Amazing. There's no strings attached. That, you know, a lot of people sometimes are scared to get on that call, but I always think if you get on that call, that's the first step in wanting to make a change, and it's something to be super proud of. So it's a friendly chat, and that, you know, and I offer that because I always believe that if you'll take something positive away from it, and if you do want to work, we know that I always believe chemistry is really important. Rapport is everything. You're going to get results when you are aligned to also the person you're working with. That's really important.
Yeah, so good. And having worked with you both as a client and you being a client, I know exactly how great you are and all of the things that you do. So thank you for joining me today. I think that as we've said, we've covered so many different things. And I hope that if you're listening to this, it's just given you that time to reflect on what might be going on for you, or what might be stopping you getting to that next level. If you're recognizing that slight misalignment, or recognizing there are certain areas where you don't feel like you're showing up to your full potential, this isn't about judgment. This is about just creating that awareness and allowing you to explore what you might need to do to take those little next steps, because it is those everyday next steps and the small steps rather than the big leaps that quite often make the difference, especially from a mindset perspective, imposter syndrome, or the perfectionism that we've spoken about as well. So we will make sure that Arianna's links get put into the show notes as well. But I hope you have enjoyed listening to us today. Arianna, thank you for joining me, and I will see you on the next episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great. Thank you.
Oh, it's always a pleasure chatting to you. I love our conversations. I will see you soon.
See you. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Healthy Business Podcast. You can get a copy of my best-selling book, Healthy You, Wealthy Business, over on my website, sarahcookcoaching.com/book. In there, you'll find practical advice, useful tools, and real actionable steps to help you be your best self and build a wildly successful business with ease, so that you can create a limitless life in the way that you choose.